Teaching is personal, but it can't get too personal. So let's talk about how to walk that fine line, how to be that tightrope artist carrying a clipboard and a whistle. My name is John Van Dusen, a longtime teacher, coach, and Army officer. And in this episode of your Classroom Coffee Break, we're talking about relationships, respect, and boundaries, connecting with students the right way. So we're going to dive right into one of the most important aspects of teaching. And if you've listened to the Classroom Coffee Break for a while, you know that this is a constant topic that just comes up in different ways, and that is building relationships. How do you connect with your students in meaningful ways, which are still appropriate and professional, especially if you live in the same town, maybe you coach their team, maybe your kids are the same age as your students. So that can be really tough. So we are going to dive right in. And first, why student connection matters. So it's not just student connection, but all foundation for learning is built on trust. So if somebody doesn't trust you, they're not going to necessarily listen to you. If they don't listen to you, they're not going to learn from you. So before you can teach a student a skill or a concept, they're going to need to trust that you are the right person to do that job. So the first part of why connection matters is you have to be able to trust each other. Think about it as from the adult point of view. If you go to a conference and somebody seems a little skeezy, you're going to be more worried about if you trust that person and what they're saying more than what they're actually saying at the time. Another reason connection matters, and again, this has been a hot topic on the Classroom Coffee Break, and it's something I'm pretty passionate about, and that is the positive relationships. And what positive relationships do, one of the biggest thing they do is you have fewer discipline problems. So if you have those students that they trust you, you have a positive relationship with them, which generally isn't in the classroom. Maybe it's in the hallway. Maybe it's on a sports team. Maybe it's because they work at Ace Hardware and you stopped there and you couldn't find the Traeger grill pellets and they helped you. And you had a little conversation basically on their own terms. When you see them in the classroom, you're going to have less discipline issues because they are going to trust you and you are going to have that positive relationship built. And another reason why student connection matters is you are more than just a teacher. You are absolutely a role model, especially in a small town. When I was going through teacher school at NMU, they talked about how as a teacher in the Upper Peninsula, you are really in a fishbowl because everybody sees the decisions you make. So if you act one way in school and then you act one way on the field and then you act one way in the Walmart, you are going to erode that trust, erode those positive relationships, and you're really going to struggle with student connection. So this next segment, we're going to talk about how to build connections with boundaries. And personal disclosure, boundaries is something I am not very good at. I'm really not good at boundaries because I just want to be involved and help everybody. But first, you're going to start with listening, and kind of that old adage of you have two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk. That's going to really help you build those relationships, and it's going to help you see where your students are coming from. I would say if you show genuine interest in what they're doing, whether that's a sport, whether that's a club. I had one of the most amazing conversations with a student that has been in my class all year, but I haven't really been able to connect with her in a meaningful way until I saw she had a bunch of drawings on her arm. Middle school girls like to draw on their arms. Why? I don't know. But I asked her about it and she said, "Oh yeah, I want to be a tattoo artist when I grow up." I was blown away. I had no idea. She's an incredible artist. The artwork on her arm was just done in pen and it looked phenomenal. But I had probably a 15-minute conversation with her about what kind of school you had to get into to be a tattoo artist, what type of degree you had to have, what did the credentialing look like, where were you going to get a job, did you have to rent a space, did you have to have insurance. She's in 8th grade and she knew all the answers to this, and she has this plan, which is phenomenal. She wants to get a travel trailer and travel around being a traveling tattoo artist where she can live in the trailer but also have either her tattoo area set up in the trailer or possibly rent spaces at different parts throughout the country. What an amazing connection I had with that student. And it's been 8.5 months. So I guess the only reason I bring that up is Never stop trying. Never stop trying to make those connections with those students. So, the last part I'll say is make sure that you keep those conversations at the appropriate level for teacher and student interaction, right? So, if you're talking about sports, if you're talking about future careers, that's awesome. But there's topics that you're just going to want to stay away from just as a professional, because the last thing you want to do is either be involved in or be accused of some type of inappropriate relationship or inappropriate conversation with a student. So just keep it professional. So this is a really tough part I have, and I mentioned it before, is setting boundaries. And I think the hardest part for me right now is my son is in eighth grade and I teach eighth grade. So all of his friends are also my students. His friends come over to the house. He goes over there. I see them on the basketball court, on the baseball field. So how to maintain that boundary. And I asked ChatGPT, which if you go back a few episodes, we talked about AI in the classroom. And it talks about be visible in their social life, but don't insert yourself. So as a parent, right, I think of Mean Girls, the movie where the mom comes in with the special drinks and asks the girls, okay, what's going on, my girls, what's the 411? She was really inserting herself into that social life instead of just being present in it. So be visible, but not invasive. And again, as a parent, that's really hard. I think the best example I can give is going to a basketball game. Rebecca and I are going to sit here. James, if you want to sit with us, you can. Or I see some of your buddies over across the way. If you want to go sit with them, you can. And sometimes he would choose to sit with us. Sometimes he would choose to sit with his friends. But we were involved, but not intrusive. Another example it was JV baseball and middle school softball. We're playing at the same time at the same facility. So James and I hit the batting cages for a while. And then I saw my cousin. So I said, hey, James, I'm going to go watch JV baseball. You can come over there if you'd like, but you don't have to. So he made the choice to go hang out with his friends and watch middle school softball. Those are all his classmates. His teammates are over there. And when the baseball game was over, I walked over by the softball game, again, involved, but not intrusive, and actually just sat on a picnic table and watched the rest of the game. And when the game was over, I sent him a message, say, hey, where are you, ready to go? And he said, actually, I'm getting a ride home with somebody else. They want to stop for ice cream. Is that okay? Perfectly okay. I was there if he needed me, but I wasn't inserting myself. I didn't go over, hey, James, how's it going? Your dad's here to embarrass you. Because let's face it, I'm embarrassing. Another boundary you can set, and this goes back to kind of that classroom thing, and I have this talk all the time, is I am not your peer, right? We can be friendly, but we are not friends. And I have a lot of fun with my students with that, especially sarcastic comments. And, a lot of times, and I've told my students this, the teachers will be in the hallway for a couple minutes after class has started. But when we come in, now it's time to go. And you get the question all the time, well, why do you get to be late? Because I'm not a student, right? Or if I have a pop or if somebody brings me a treat, well, why do you get to eat in class? Why do you get to have a treat? Because I'm not your peer, homie. I am the teacher. So we play a little game in the Army. We call it paper, rock, scissors, rank. So your rank is right here on your chest. You hold it up and it's like, hey, why do you get to do that? I don't know. Let's play a little game. Paper, rock, scissors, rank. I win. So kind of the same thing with the students. Be friendly, have fun with them, but just have them understand the difference between being the person in charge, the authority figure, and their peer. You're not their peer. I think this is really hard for younger teachers because they come in and the age gap between them and their students is really, really small. It's easier for me. I'm a mid 40s guy teaching 14-year-olds. They obviously know I'm not their peer. But when somebody comes in, I have high school students come in that help with my classroom. The gap is really small, like 3 or 4 years. So it's really tough to realize who's in charge and who's your friend. We're friendly, but we're not friends. So it's just a difficult thing to do, I think, for me personally, is to set those boundaries and then stick to them. So I want to cover this next part, and I can only comment on one side of this topic. So if you teach and or live in a bigger city, I would love to hear in the comments how you deal with this. But the difference between being in a small town and being in a big city. So I live in a small town. I taught in 2 other small towns, and you run into your students everywhere because you're all a part of the community. So you're going to see them at Walmart, at church, at the gas station. You're going to see them all over the place. And I'm in this scenario right now where I have students that are over at the house because they're friends with my son, which is great. So again, just keep that boundary of we are friendly but not friends, and remember that you are really living your life in a fishbowl. So if, kids are over at your house, or if you see them out and about and you're acting like an idiot, they're going to be like, "Oh, that's not the role model that I thought that was." So just keep that in mind when you're in a small town. You're going to have you're really more in a fishbowl than I would argue in a big city. And then I mentioned this a couple times, but having your son or daughter be friends with your students and having them at the same birthday parties, on the same sports teams, coming over to your house, your kids are going over to their house. It's just something that you have to really separate, that being a parent and being a teacher. And I know we've had this talk with James around here. Sometimes there's conversations that go on. Maybe I'm on the phone at night with another teacher and we're trying to hash something out. And he really understands the confidentiality of, hey, I understand dad is talking about something at work. And even though I'm privy to it, I know what's happening. I really have to not share that or let on that I know. So just practice that confidentiality and keep it professional between your students, your kids, what happens at home, and what happens at school. It's a little tough, but you can do it. So here's a spot I can't speak on at all, and where I would appreciate some input, and that is teaching in a big city. I don't know what that's like. I've never taught in a big city. I taught in Gwynn for my student teaching, which is super small. I taught in Lawrence, which is super small, similar to Gwynn. And I have taught in Kingsford, which is a little bit bigger community, but still pretty small. Upper Peninsula, UP, all the kids know each other. Even though we have Iron Mountain in Kingsford, I'm friends with Iron Mountain teachers and I know Iron Mountain kids. So it's really small. So in the big city, again, I asked AI, thanks AI. I believe that's episode 29, episode 28, something like that. Go back and check. I think you'll like it. But I asked, what are some challenges in the big city? And it said, you might not see your students outside of school much, but the relationships still matter, maybe even more. So that's where you really need to be intentional with building those relationships. And if you're an advisor for a club or some kind of advisory time, if you have the ability to coach a sport or even just attend a robotics competition or a play, a concert, any of those types of things, a sporting event, any types of those things where you can take those experiences and insert them into the classroom. Say, hey, Jimmy, I saw you last night at the basketball game. Or, hey, Jude, I saw you, 2 nights ago at the concert and I really love this song. How did you guys practice that? Anything you can do to help build that relationship is going to help you. But again, I've never taught in a big city. So if you have, or if you know somebody who has, please link them up with the Classroom Coffee Break. I'd love to talk to them about the different challenges of teaching in a big city versus a small town. So I'm going to finish with this, in that you do not need to be, and as a matter of fact, you cannot be your student's friend. You need to be their teacher. You need to be that steady, caring adult, parental figure if you're teaching your own kids, but that gets a little more tricky. You can cheer them on, joke with them. If you come up to the 8th grade hallway, you will hear so much sarcasm between the teachers and the students and the joking around and so much laughing. And we have so much fun together while maintaining that boundary. Now, it's not a barrier because sometimes those students need more than just a teacher, right? But at the same time, and you can go back several episodes and I talked about teachers, when you receive tough information, you may need to forward that on to administration, counselors, law enforcement, whatever. But you really can be friendly with your students without being friends. So again, I appreciate you stopping by for your classroom coffee break, and join us next time when we talk about how to rock a solid review coming out of a break. So until next time, keep showing up, Keep modeling that great behavior. Keep making a difference.